Hello there. This is Nate coming to you from Nightingale Writing Center with another of our at least weekly webinars. This webinar today is going to cover quite a bit of territory, but I would say that there's a connecting issue to all of them, and they all have to do with things that can be especially confusing. So let's undo the confusion. So what are our subjects for today? Let's check it out. As soon as I get my computer to cooperate, because it's not letting me do what I want. That's okay. That's okay. We will survive. So it's not at all what I want. Come on. So I want to start the slideshow. That's all I want. There we go. All right. So 3 different things that we're looking at that have various types of confusion involved with them. First is pronouns and homophones. We are not looking at pronouns. We are not looking at homophones. Neither of them beyond just basic definitions, because we're looking at pronouns that are homophones, and this is confusing. We'll get that confusion sorted. Next, ellipses, dashes, and hyphens. How do we type these? How do we use these? How do we tell them apart? We'll get it worked out. And finally, writing discussion posts, which is something that you've got to do for a lot of your classes, if not all of them. And figuring out exactly what to say and how to say it, it can be a little confusing as well, but we'll get all of that sorted. So just to be clear, this webinar is being recorded for archival purposes. If you are listening to me, you are watching a recording because I am solo today. That's okay. That's why we record. All right, let's look very briefly at what a pronoun is. Pronouns are a part of speech. There are between 8 and 10 parts of speech, depending on which grammarian you speak with. Generally speaking, pronouns can take the place of nouns within a sentence. Some examples here. James likes the cat. All right. What would we substitute James with? I'll show you in a second. You can go through the rest of these sentences, zero in on the red texts. Figure out for yourself, what words can we use to substitute? Let's go ahead and flip and see how that goes. So you can see, generally speaking, pronouns take the place of nouns and serve the same function within sentences as nouns in terms of how they relate to the other words. All right, so I have listed a couple of the classes of pronouns. They are the ones that we think of most commonly. There's 1 or 2 others like relative pronouns that I didn't dive into in this presentation because, like I said, we're going to focus on the pronouns that also happen to have homophones. So we've looked at personal pronouns, indefinite pronouns. As I told you, there are relative pronouns, who, whom, that, which. It's a short list. I didn't want to make a slide for 4 words. So let's then look more specifically at the issue of homophones. What is a homophone? Well, the homo part comes from Greek for same, phone comes from sound, like telephone. So words with the same sounds. They sound the same, but they have different spellings and different meanings. And unfortunately, I got some examples of homophones here. You can see what I was saying. Pair, 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 bear, bear, as we go through all of those sentences. Unfortunately, pronouns, if you hadn't figured out, are words that we use quite a bit. And so they're common, and they sound just like other words in English that also happen to be very common, because we are dealing with two pools of very common words that makes them easier to confuse. So homophones can pose challenges in writing that are not a problem in speech. This is very important. When we are speaking, the vast majority of us are not thinking about how a word is spelt as we are speaking. So for many of us, not all, but many, when we write, we may be writing down what we hear a voice in our head saying. But what did I say earlier? We don't think about spelling when we're speaking. And if we're transcribing this voice in our head, that's how some of these errors can slip into our writing, even if we have these rules mastered, which, by the way, is why you want to edit and revise your writing a few times, or at least that's one reason. So if you accidentally write the wrong word, you can confuse the reader, say something you don't intend, make your sentence grammatically impossible to follow. You want your writing to be understood and to followed. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that you're using the right spelling for what you intend. So let's check these out. And again, yes, some of these pronouns are homophones with other pronouns. That makes things even more challenging. It's okay. We're going to get it all untangled. Let's go first for the one that is probably the single most confused pair of pronoun homophones of all. It's versus its. So what is confusing here? As you can see, that without an apostrophe, it means belonging to it. With an apostrophe, it means it is. Oh, boy. Do you see what the confusion is? In English, we typically put an apostrophe S at the end of a noun to show possession or belonging. So if I said Nate's shirt, it would be my name, Nate apostrophe S. So it is no wonder that people will want to use this second form that's only supposed to be for it is as the possessive. It makes perfect sense that this is an error that happens. Well, an easy way to keep this straight is to simply remember the word it is a pronoun and not a noun. And therefore, we don't want to attach noun rules onto pronouns, just like we would not attach noun rules to verbs or vice versa. Let's test here really quick. I'll just pause a second, have you read these sentences to yourself and see if you can figure out which is correct. All right, let's check it out. We see the rule. If you can replace with it is, use it apostrophe s. Otherwise, use it without. There is your rule to hang on to. If you tuned out the past 2 minutes, just remember this. If you run into it, replace it with it is. Does the sentence make any sense? Let's check. First sentence. It's going to rain today. Can we replace it with the it is? It is going to rain today. It makes sense. Apostrophe S. Let's check the second sentence. That's hard to say. Each bag has its own tag. Replace it with it is. Each bag has it is own tag. That does not make a lick of sense. Therefore, no apostrophe. All right. And you can see that's exactly what we've got going here. All right, second confused pair. And again, these are two pronouns. And this is always strikes me interesting because your approach to this may depend on your accent. For me, I do not pronounce these two words the same way. I pronounce the top one, your, and the bottom one, your, or ur. But I also know I don't speak exactly the way a typical American does, thanks to moving around a lot and absorbing a lot. Most Americans are going to pronounce these two words the same, and that's where they get confused. So the top one, your, belonging to you. Oh, we've got another one of these pronouns that deal with possession. And again, we have another deal with an apostrophe. Your, you are. The rule for this is probably going to look something like the rule that we saw for its and its. So it's the same sort of rule of substitution. Try to replace with you are, and if it doesn't make any sense, then you know not to use the version with the apostrophe. Let's check this again. Check up at the top sentence. You are not going to believe this. Makes perfect sense. Use the apostrophe. Second sentence. Did you forget you are hat? I am not a hat. Did you forget you are hat does not make any sense at all. No apostrophe. And as we check the corrected sentences, we see it's exactly how I explained. Right. Moving on. Whose and whose. All right. Whose. I rattled off relative pronouns and I left out this one earlier, so forgive me for that. But whose, belonging to someone unknown. Whose hat is this? I don't know. It's someone unknown. And again, another apostrophe. Who is? Guess what? We're going to have the same substitution rule. Substitute with who is. And if you can, use the apostrophe form. If not, spell out W-H-O-S-E. Let's check with these two sentences. Do you know whose car this is? Oh, that sounds horrible. It makes no sense at all. Second sentence. Who is the man wearing purple? Makes perfect sense. Let's check. Well, I'm just going to have to tell you that in the first sentence, we need the first form without the apostrophe because who is makes no sense. Second one, who is makes sense. So apostrophe. Who is the man wearing purple? Who apostrophe S, the man wearing purple. All right. Now let's get to the triple whammy here. There. These, in terms of meaning, can be easier to sort out, I think, than some of the ones that we've looked at so far. However, again, because we're so often listening to that inner narrator as we type, even if you have this rule down perfectly, errors can slip into your first drafts, therefore make a second or third draft, preferably and third draft. All right. 3 model sentences, and we need to figure out the rules for this because we have 3 words instead of 2. it means we have to go through more steps of elimination. So let's check. Again, if we got an apostrophe situation, we're going to try that substitution. In this case, we're going to substitute with they are. Let's check the sentences. They are about to start. Sounds good. Second, they are is too much to do. I have no idea how to parse that. They are cat went to the vet. Again, makes no sense. So with the apostrophe, I think works for the first sentence. They are about to start. They're about to start. T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E. Next, we're going to have to, let's say you've determined that it cannot be they apostrophe R-E. How do you know if it's E-I-R or E-R-E? Well, T-H-E-I-R is another one of those possessive pronouns. So if the word seems to be about possession, then a group of people or things owning something, you're going to use E-I-R. Let's check these two sentences. There is too much to do. Do they own is? You can't own is. Is a verb. So that makes no sense in the first one. Third sentence. Their cat went to the vet. Do they own a cat? Sure sounds like it. And as you can see, we got it there. So if you have tried both of these rules, you've checked for they are and it doesn't work. You've checked for possession and it doesn't work. Well, process of elimination, you know it's about T-H-E-R-E. That is the choice. A word that can have a few different meanings. So it's harder to make a test for that because it has a few different meanings. But again, process of elimination, just go through the rules for T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E and the rules for T-H-E-I-R. If neither apply, you're there. Now, we've been looking a lot at contractions, which are these words where we got the apostrophe combining two words specifically. Apostrophes can have a couple of different functions in written English, but we're talking specifically with regard to combining two words into one. Guess what? APA Style Manual says do not use contractions in academic writing. So if you're puzzling through your Y-O-U-R versus Y-O-U apostrophe R-E and you come to the conclusion, oh, I need apostrophe R-E, guess what? If you're doing academic writing in APA style, you need to split that apart into U-R anyway. So paradoxically, this restriction that we have with the APA Style Manual actually streamlines things a little bit, because if you're making these substitutions to determine if you can replace the word with two words, then you got to be using two words. You are, who is, they are. All that said, you are going to find these contractions outside of academic writing. Oh, maybe in letters and memos and such like that in the workplace. So, in non-academic settings. So it's still important to know what we've gone through, even if it's not always going to apply to academic writing, which forbids contractions. All right, let's move on. Let's sort out some confusion here with ellipses, dashes, and hyphens. Now, most punctuation marks are used to mark grammatical function and relationships between words in sentence. But that's not what these punctuation marks have to do with. We'll see what they do. And they also have some similar purposes, but not exactly the same. And that's the confusion. That's part of the confusion we'll sort out. We'll also sort out why and how they all looked at this similarly. All right. Ellipses, it's 3 dots in a row. It does not, you're not going to confuse the appearance with dashes or hyphens. It has 2 specific purposes. One is to show that one or more words have been omitted from a quotation. And this is huge in academic writing because there are times when you just want to get to the heart of a quotation. And you don't want it dominating your paper. So you can use the ellipsis to drop out words judiciously, and I'll explain why judiciously in a moment. So we see here, Nelson Mandela said, "The greatest glory in living lies in rising every time we fall." A lovely sentiment, but it's not exactly what he said. He slipped in a few words in between. And this writer, okay, I'm the writer because I made the slide presentation, but this theoretical writer decided, I can cut out those words and the meaning stays the same. And this is the important part. It would be very easy to use an ellipsis to take out the word not, say, or something like that, and trying to make it look like a person said exactly the opposite of what was intended. That is an egregious abuse of an ellipsis and absolutely should not happen in academic writing at all. If you're using an ellipsis, preserve the meaning and the intent of the speaker. Now, the other purpose of an ellipsis is not something we would find in APA, and that is to show a speaker is trailing off. If I tweak the style, I wonder why. I don't know. The scientist was talking to herself and just trailed off. This is something that you will see in novels and other narrative writing a fair bit, but it has no place in academic writing. So you're only going to be using it for those omissions from a quotation. I should say, I'm going to pause here before moving on. If you'll notice, when I typed this out at the bottom, I actually wrote 4 dots in a row. And I've been saying that an ellipsis is 3, and it's because we actually have an ellipsis followed by a period. Okay. An ellipsis is always 3 dots when you are doing the omission. You can see that there are only 3 dots. But if you're putting it at the end of a sentence, which we're not going to do in APA writing anyway, but an ellipsis cannot end a sentence. A period can. So you got to put the 3 dots of the ellipsis plus the 1 dot of the period per 4. All right, now you know. Dashes, dashes, dashes. So there are 2 types of dashes, neither one of which should be confused with a hyphen, which gets very confusing as we have to use the hyphen key to type it, but we'll unpack that as we go. 2 types of dashes named after their lengths. The M dash is about as long as a lowercase m. And we can use this to highlight part of a sentence or emphasize part of a sentence. So this is a handy tool to have in an acceptable tool to have in your writing toolkit for APA academic writing. All right. So we see here, I think, and I don't say this lightly, that we need to make a new plan. Notice that if I'm reading this, I naturally want to take a pause at those M dashes, and it makes it feel a little bit more like the way that most people actually talk. When we want to emphasize, we take a little pause, just like that. Now, here's the thing, though, is that there's no hard and fast rule for when you have to use an M dash. As I can show you here, I just wrote out that same sentence using parentheses and then again using commas. In both situations, we're using the punctuation to highlight that phrase, and I don't say this lightly. Commas make the grammar clear and would be the most conventional use here. But again, in this very specific situation, we can substitute commas with something else. And I can also use a phrase or word that didn't incorporate the word and then we would be leaning more on parentheses or M dashes, right? So that's the M dash. We also have the N dash, which is it's the width of a lowercase n. And we only have one very specific use for it. And that is to go in between two numbers to show a range of, the flu pandemic of 1918 to 1920. We're getting a range, 1918, 1919, 1920. But we're not going to write out all 3 years. We'll put the N dash in the middle. Now, let's check out the hyphen, and I'll have something very important to say about the hyphen key on your keyboard. So a hyphen is shorter than both an M dash and an N dash, and it is the default for the key that you press at the top of your keyboard. This is specifically to combine words into one part of speech. So we see the 5-year-old class took a trip to the zoo. The word 5, it's a number. It's could be described as an adjective. Most current grammarians would call it a determiner, which I don't talk about as much here at Nightingale. Year is a noun. Old is an adjective. What? This is kind of this weird mess of words, but we're trying to combine them all into a of the word class. What kind of class? 5-year-old class. We can't smash those all into one word, so we use the hyphens. You can see we can also do this in the second sentence to make a noun out of words that are not nouns, or not all of them nouns. All right. Here's the challenge when you're typing. I've talked about 3 different punctuation marks, the M dash, the N dash, and the hyphen. You only have one key for all of them. And it's not always a matter of simply pressing it twice. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it depends on your software. And this is what I want to say. I could take a lot of time describing all the ways that and methods that you have to type the M dash or the N dash just using the hyphen key. Sometimes it depends on the software or the program that you're using. Sometimes it's simply not an option. Bear this in mind for things like Canvas discussion boards, like we're going to talk about in a second. In that case, usually I just I press the hyphen twice to represent the M dash because that's the best I can do. Here's the thing. There in Word, in Microsoft Word, there are a few different ways to type the M dash and the N dash. And I would encourage you to explore and look up the different methods and figure out which works best for you. I think that's more efficient than me grinding through all of them and you choosing from there. All right. I mentioned discussion boards. Let's talk about writing discussion posts, something that you'll do throughout your time at Nightingale College. And it can be difficult to figure out exactly what to say and what tone to strike with what you're saying. That's where confusion lies, and that's where we're going to get it straightened out. You want to think a lot about the context that you're in. You're there with your instructor as well as numerous peers who are learning the subject matter along with you. That's the context. When you're trying to figure out these issues of voice and tone, always think of the context and the purpose. So here, our purpose really is we're trying to replicate a respectful way to speak and write that mimics what would take place in a classroom, in a physical classroom, with an instructor up at the front leading a discussion, and the learners in their desks may be raising their hands, talking back and forth. Think about how that looks, how it looks when it works well and how it works when it doesn't. And I think if you bear that in mind, maybe tap into your high school experience and carry that over to your discussion posts. High school experience or prior college experience, maybe in even better context, as the majority of you at least have had prior college experience. Think about those classes where the class discussions worked well, carry that over here, and that's going to cover you about 99%. So keeping the language informal, but not overly casual. All right. Because you're not giving a formal presentation, you're not giving prepared notes or whatever. You're talking to your peers in a somewhat professional setting, but not a formal setting. Let's look at my sample sentence here. So I was thinking about what all we talked about, and now I'm really excited. So we're opening with so, which can sound a little more casual. Really formal people would say you can never open a sentence with so. Most grammarians today say those people are wrong, but you do run into it. APA says it's fine, by the way, but there's a certain way that it feels a little more casual. I had a friend on Facebook was just relating that this is such a common way to open Facebook posts. So I was thinking about what all we talked about. It's the sort of phrasing that we use all the time, but if I were editing my writing, I might refine it to, I was thinking about everything we talked about, right? But you're not aiming to sound so formal and here. All right. And now I'm really excited. Remember, I said earlier that APA writing doesn't allow contractions. So if this were an APA paper, we'd have to write out, and now I am really excited. But this isn't APA, and we're in a space that's more informal. And in English, one of the prime markers of more informal speech and writing is the use of contractions. Perfectly okay here. All right. So that's getting at the how to speak. Let's think too about what to say. You want to be specific. I think one of the easy traps to fall into with a discussion post is to get more generic in your statements and to be like, okay, well, I ticked this off for this week, rather than, saying something deep and meaningful that helps to further the conversation, which if you think about those those physical classroom settings that you've been in that were really engaging and active, it's because people were digging into the specifics of the issue and also asking questions, proposing ideas, putting ideas out there to fuel the discussion and get other people talking, right? It's not just about earning points for your class, but about developing and engaging in a conversation that is helpful and useful for your profession, right? Reframed that way, suddenly the idea of I need to be specific, I need to propose ideas or ask questions, suddenly it makes a lot more sense that that's the purpose behind what you're doing here. So model sentence, very specific. It's asking a question, how can we solve the problems? All right, there's a question that were talked about in chapter 2. Now we're getting into specificity there. All right. Finally, you can, and maybe I should have put this first, but you know, we want to have a certain warmth to our discussion posts, which can be a little challenging when we're not in the same physical space with people. If you were sitting in a physical classroom, you probably wouldn't be addressing someone by name almost every time you spoke to them. But using these little things, hello, Robin, great post, Maria, so on and so forth, to tag or open your conversations, it both helps to bridge the distance that we often can feel when we are in a digital asynchronous environment. But also, these little tags like this where you're addressing who you're speaking to in the opening of your discussion post makes it clear to everyone exactly who and what you're addressing. And this is key because if you've got 25, 30 classmates plus maybe a lot more than that, depending on the class, some classes are small, some are big. It can get confusing keeping track of who is responding to whom. Using these little tags addressing someone by name at the beginning of your post makes the discussion much easier to follow. All right, that is all that I have for today. I will thank you very, very much. I hope that you have found this recording helpful and useful. And always remember, we here at Nightingale Writing Center offer a lot of different services to fit different schedules and different needs for our learners. We're here for you. We want to offer everything that we can so that you can succeed. All right. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day. Bye now.